Welcome back for a brand new 3876 AD lore video. The next part of episode 3 is here, and I hope you are excited for more military science fiction, as we take a look at an artificial lifeform whose construction is as much a mystery as its origin. For more content just like this, subscribe to the channel and smash that like button. And now, let's roll. Traveling through the Devan Forest is very dangerous and requires extreme survivalist knowledge. The ancient wars of the pre-3876 era have transformed the entire eastern region of the central continent on Earth. Now a dense rainforest extends far and wide, and while the rugged landscape unveils a field of cliffs and valleys, deep pits following a network of roots extend throughout a vast cave system underneath. Volcanic activity often bursts the land apart, creating floating islands held together by massive plant life, which relentlessly profiliates the entire region. An ancient combat augmentation called modification drones was let loose in the atmosphere. Without a host, which would be the soldiers who would use them to enhance their combat ability, these microscopic machines would disperse and become rogue. Most of these rogue modification drones are inert, but many things can trigger a reaction. In mass quantities, they can engulf large areas within a dark fog, which is, while unbreathable, mostly harmless. The plant life was afflicted first, by randomly activated rogue modification drones. The combination of intense endless warfare between the factions during the pre-3876 era and augmented flora was quite extreme. Eventually, not only was the plant life, but also the animal life afflicted. This forced evolution had created many hostile places to man. The Devan Forest and many other regions are a direct result of these events. Toxic gases in the air of the Devan Forest area are ever present, and while one can get used to the ill effects it has on the body, most soldiers would use respiratory devices or targeted body modifications to survive this place. Before the early Earth military could proceed with their mission to save humanity from the destruction of the modification drones, a long expedition into the depths of the Devan Forest was necessary. Led by the legendary Commander Larson, a small company of the best elite soldiers would partake in a treacherous quest to find an artifact of long lost times, the very key to their later success. Many high-profile characters had joined the early Earth military and became members of Larson's elite force in the weeks leading up to this mission. This was still a while before Larson would officially found the Earth military. With his most trusted allies at the time, and the influence of the early Earth military in the region more or less secured, Larson was ready to risk it. Like the plant and animal life, some minor form of forced evolution also happened to man. All of which, of course, led up to a society who knows only warfare and combat. The legacy of the past is no more. The afflicted are mindless super soldiers who have lived and died many times over for hundreds of years. The modification drones basically went haywire, and everything of our old world was screwed over. Glimpses of conscious thought throughout many centuries of endless warfare allowed Larson to eventually overcome the destructive programming of the modification drones, becoming one of the first Awoken. A name only used much later, far into the post-3876 era. There are at least 3 types of Awoken, and each of them have different abilities and characteristics accordingly. The first type are the controllers. Larson is also one of them. The main ability of controllers is having, as the name suggests, conscious control over the modification drones in and even around their bodies. This is by far the strongest and most flexible type, which can utilize the full unreal nature of the modification drones to manipulate their surroundings on an atomic level, and even influence gravity itself. The second type are the absorbers, which is a specific Orkan trait. Fallen soldiers brought back to life, the forced evolution of man. They are cyborgs who use rogue modification drones for their industries and weapons. Before the early Earth military, absorbers were the strongest. Orkans have bodies made from the toughest materials, and technologies far beyond that of all the other factions. They were the titans of destruction. The last common type are the deciders. With the controllers around, the modification drones of the afflicted had become disturbed. Deciders remain afflicted but have lost their drive for endless warfare. The soldiers of the early Earth military were either controllers or deciders. Absorbers, the Orkans, while mostly non-hostile, would never become part of the Earth military and went their own way later down the line. Finally, after many daunting decades of fighting and increasing the territorial gains for the early Earth military, Larson knew that the final steps can now be taken to change humanity and turn everything around. In his mind lingers a thought, a memory fragment from ancient times, which guides him to his goal. While traversing the dangerous landscape of the Devan Forest, Larson and his team had developed a close camaraderie which hadn't been possible since the introduction of the modification drones on a mass scale. In the late pre-3876 era, though changed, some form of humanity had returned to them. The reason for this expedition had been innocuous to many. Even Commander Larson himself is not sure why he is drawn to this place. Some remnant of his memory tells him that there is something important here. Guided only by his intuition, the steadfast elite squad would begin their venture at the eastmost region, where no battles took place for many decades, since the entire landscape is almost impassable. While the massive undergrowth made it hard to use any form of vehicles, even worse is the very dangerous animal life in this region. Giant reptiles, massive ape-like beasts, as well as all forms of hostile and venomous oversized insects are abundant. Because of the uncontrolled forced evolution by the rogue modification drones, now a large-scale bombardment would be required to get rid of this infestation. In turn, this would also completely destroy mass amounts of the continent, which is why no Earth faction nor Moon faction have ever bothered to do anything about it. Larson's goal is to reach the heart of the Devan Forest and descend into the cave system far beneath the surface. In a place with high volcanic activity and lava streams flowing about, in his vision, there will be an encasement where he will find a powerful ancient artifact. The entire expedition took them many years, and many trips back to their faction encampments were necessary. Larson even managed to expand the early Earth military further, with the help of others, of course. Many more smaller expeditions were formed to retrieve long-lost weapons, materials, and technologies who had been swallowed by the forest. These autonomous groups would further bolster the position of the early Earth military and started to become infamous for their combat power. Eventually, they would enter a cave system that went deep down into the earth, which Larson knew to be the right path. His unexplainable vision drew him to this place, but he still was not sure what he would find here. Even the Orkans had started to notice the movement of the early Earth military, and during Larson's expedition he would encounter these machine men many times over, with most interactions more or less violent. In the meantime, many more soldiers had joined his team. Also the cunning rogue Kaya Vashar had been part of this last expedition. Larson and Kaya even started to develop affection for each other. Due to the changed physiology of humans, in the world of 3876 AD, relationships of this kind are almost inexistent. When they reached their goal, an ancient mechanical doorway blocked their path. Deep down in the cave system, this massive door and the bunker behind it seems to have stood the test of time. An ancient relic from a time even earlier than what the people know as the pre-3876 era. The elite squad had no trouble getting in, as the door's automated scanning system surprisingly not only recognized Larson's presence, but also that of Kaya and a few others in his team. This could only mean that all of them must have already been present once in a long-lost past. A surprise to everyone, for sure. Inside the bunker was a tiny lab. Some spare parts and a few contraptions were of notable interest, but mostly the equipment seems to have served its purpose once and is no longer of any use to anyone. On the far end of this small corridor is a large encasement, a capsule big enough to contain what appears to be some form of human-like life form. Larson and 2 science soldiers would activate the capsule and release what was inside of it. This is the artifact the commander was looking for, the artificial life form GT. This new addition would greatly influence the future conduct of the early Earth military. Larson was able to influence people with his controller abilities. He could either try and turn them into controllers as well, which would be the best case, but more often people would just become deciders on their own. Saving humanity meant that the firm grip the modification drones have over the mind must be broken. Amongst the controllers, it was still a highly debated topic how they could possibly achieve that on a larger scale. With the artificial lifeform GT, everything changed. Apparently once built by Larson himself, he would have the solution to the problem. The knowledge to reprogram the modification drones was stored in his circuits. Foreseeing the grave plight of man in the far future, GT was built and sealed away until the time when his knowledge would be able to save all of humanity and avert the impending doom by the modification drones. GT is the only absorber type that is part of the Earth military from that point onwards. His existence is by all means very unique, and as such, it is somewhat a stretch to put him on the same level as the Orkans. Ancient technology, which had been developed around the early decades of the pre-3876 era, is most of the time much more sophisticated than the technology of later times. This was not due to the knowledge being lost per se, but rather because of the extreme focus shift on warfare and very little emphasis on innovation. Scientists in the pre-3876 era had only focused on increasing their combat effectiveness, which was always closely tied to the abilities of their enemies. This was also the reason why the factions both from Earth and the Moon had always struggled against the Orkans. Their slight advantage in innovation gave them the edge over all the others. The lack of interest in old and oftentimes superior technology would remain also in the post-3876 era for different reasons. The main reason, however, was still that the overall technological level of the society had advanced to such an extreme degree, something described as beyond automation, that there was just no need for improvement. The artificial lifeform GT is probably one of the most notable examples of this superior ancient technology, but also the modification drones fall under this category, as they were developed around the same time as GT himself. When the artificial lifeform was activated, it was revealed that he had been in some form of stasis the entire time, causing many of his memory banks to be corrupted. The most protected datasets were of his knowledge to specifically develop a second strain of modification drones, which would turn everyone into controllers. To achieve their goal, the early Earth military would need high-tech equipment and industries to create and mass-produce the new strain of modification drones, after which the entire human population would have to be inoculated for this to work. In the late pre-3876 era, there was still one such facility around, the Ardaman Research Facility, a massive complex who had been taken over by one of the strongest factions of that time. Most equipment had broken down by now, but despite all of that, they had managed to get some impressive gear running. With the help of Moon faction soldiers and equipment, their slight advantage when it comes to tools and their means made it possible to even stave off the Orkans until now, even if only barely. This was the point where the early Earth military started to seriously plan taking over entirely. Their special abilities have been kept mostly on a low profile, but it was inevitable that the other factions would notice sooner or later. With the help of GT and many others in his elite team, Larson would plan for months and eventually their assault would start. A campaign that lasted many weeks. and in the end, they managed to take over and secure the facility for their own. Production of the second strain of modification drones started immediately. What followed after that were the interstellar crusades, and the inoculations of the populations on Earth and the Moon took its course. Starting with the conquest of the Moon, and later moving further out to the remaining colonies, space stations, and settlements out there in the void. Finally, after so many years, the newly founded Earth military would become a beacon piercing the corruption. At the age 3876 AD, humanity was able to start anew. The affliction of the modification drones was purged, but only partially. With the formation of the Moon Alliance, many living far away from the homeworld would still only transition to deciders. The inoculation with the second strain would turn all of them into controllers. However, their unwillingness to concur with the demands of the Earth military had created a rift between these new powers. The artificial lifeform GT had only very little to do with the dealings outside of Earth. Despite him being essentially something like an android, he still does have feelings of belonging and wants to continue to help humanity in this new endless age. As part of the Earth military in the post-3876 era, he is the administrator in the western region of the central continent, which consists of the Brianna Wilderness and Jodvik, a new high-tech city in the heart of this land. It took many decades before the city reached its prosperity, but it is a testament to time itself that mankind had returned. The differences between the Earth military, the Orkans, and the Moon Alliance remain. Peace had returned, and many challenges lay ahead. When Commander Larson suddenly vanished one day, GT made it his highest priority to find him again. It is obvious that the Orkans are behind his disappearance, but moving against them would not result in anything useful. With the minimal industries they still had on Earth, GT would lead a team of researchers to build spaceships that would try to find Larson. It was a safe bet that he must be out there in space somewhere. Larson's last encounter with the Orkans involved their new space traveling method, some form of transportation device creating spatial rifts which they had used before, but only on a much smaller scale. This was something else. Aside from their other industries, this new technology was especially harmful to the environment. As absorbers, the Orkans have long since used the rogue modification drones as fuel and for many other applications as well. As a result of this, the otherwise rather harmless dark fog, the corruption of the landscape created by mass amounts of rogue modification drones, would now become hazardous. In search for anything they can utilize as energy source, these modification drones will start to consume, and even the landscape itself is not safe. After Larson's disappearance, GT also had to spend a lot of time dealing with this new threat, as does Kaya in her jurisdiction to the east in the Devan Forest. The usage of this new technology had brought about a new form of corruption, and it is the self-given duty of the Earth military to seek it out and destroy it. This of course set them very much at odds with the Orkans, who are unwilling to change their way of life, and while not seeking direct confrontation with the Earth military, they will find ways to hide their machinations. Since the Earth military and the Moon Alliance are still mostly on good terms with each other, GT even managed to involve them in dealing with the corruption as well. This is very much in the interest of the Moon Alliance, as they are on a mission of space exploration and colonialization, and the Orkans will do them no favor when contaminating the environment. The Orkans had been a spacefaring society since almost their beginnings. It came naturally to them to use their advanced machine bodies for research in the endless depths of the stars. Now that they use this new technology, they seem to threaten the entirety of the cosmos. Diplomatic relations with the Orkans are possible, but rarely conclusive. While they do acknowledge the dangers of their industries and agree to concessions, many times their experiments still prove to be very harmful to the environment and mostly very dangerous for all the others around them. In the world of 3876 AD, only immortals remain. What this future will bring is yet unclear, but the old days of endless warfare are finally over. Something which would have never been possible without GT's help. In these days, he works at the capital of the Earth military, Jodvik, and conducts his research about space travel, gravity, and time. It will take probably many more years before GT can find Larson, or until he returns on his own. In the meantime, he will dedicate his efforts to Larson's vision of a humanity that can finally live and prosper in peace. The greatest challenge of all will be to find out what the people on Earth will strive for in their lives. A question which is not easily answered, considering we're dealing with a society who was at war for so long. The main goal of the Earth military would now be to keep the peace and reinvent their society to the better. Malkaya would become the administrator of the Devan Forest and mostly deals with the mutated plant and animal life, as well as regular encounters with the Orkans. GT's jurisdiction in Jodvik and the Brianna wilderness was quite different. These regions had always been the stage of larger conflicts. As such, the land is less overgrown and far less dangerous. The ancient war machines that became derelict over time and the large cities who lie now but in ruins embellish the landscape. With a new direction for humanity, there was no interest to recreate their once mighty empire. Instead, the people on Earth are much more comfortable with smaller medieval-like settlements, where they live a mostly idyllic and stagnant life, as the immortals they are. Even the capital Jodvik is only very small, and aside from some high-tech buildings and one or two high-rises, nothing about this settlement would be considered a true city in our eyes. The capital mainly serves as headquarters for a large portion of the Earth military. One of the more industrial plans issued in by GT himself would be to build a railway connection between Jodvik and the Brianna wilderness, to make it easier for goods from the farmlands to reach the city and the regions in between. In the post-3876 era, most of the population on Earth is either part of the Earth military and fends off the dangers of the land, or they have become farmers for food and materials, as well as manufacturers of much needed high-tech components. Large industries have mostly ceased to exist. Humans on Earth only produce as much as they need and are quite happy with a rather archaic style of living, mostly very rural and in relative harmony with the nature around them. There are many dangers, but since all of them are the soldiers they once were, only much more benign, they still know very much how to fend for themselves. Thank you again so much for watching. I hope you had a great time. There are still many more stories to tell you about this artificial life form GT, but as always, this should only serve as a short introduction to the character. Please subscribe to the channel, like and share this video, and for more, you can leave a comment below. I'm sure I will react in no time. Thanks for all the support, and we will see us in the next one.